Welcome to the Good News Show with me, your host, Professor Grant Schofield. The Good News Show, good news designed for your frontal lobes, the tools you need for a happy and healthy life. Brought to you by Precure, precure.com, where prevention is cure. So in breaking news, new news about sleep. The good news is that sleep's good for you. And if you didn't already know that, I don't know where you've been, but the recommendation for curious minds is to go and read a bit further about it and learn all the tips and tricks. And the book I like, Why We Sleep, by Dr. Matthew Walker, is an absolute cracker. If I can recommend that as a starting point to really understand the latest biology and techniques around getting a good night's sleep and why it's so important. It's a really compelling, easy to read scientific book. Exactly the sort of book that all of us researchers and scientists strive to write. So well done, Dr. Matthew Walker. If you can't be bothered reading the book and you'd rather listen to the podcasts around this, then I can highly recommend Peter Attia's podcast, The Drive, which is a cracker podcast anyway, around health and longevity, but particularly episodes 47, 48, 127 and 128 are all extensive interviews with Dr. Matthew Walker. Why We Sleep is an absolute beauty book. You'll love it. Get out there, do yourself a favor, and learn more about the biology of sleep. In other breaking news around Australia and New Zealand, a lot of people have been ticking off their to-do lists, but an equal number have been changing how they do that and thinking about what's on that to-do list. And they've been examining it using a new technique in positive psychology called the VIA Strengths Inventory. The VIA Strengths Inventory is an absolute beauty for helping you understand the character strengths that you value and enjoy doing the most. And there's 24 of them. You're not going to be good at all of them. And in fact, you're going to have a top 5. For me, my top 5 are creativity, love of new knowledge, curiosity, those sorts of things, which is great because I'm a professor and a researcher at a university, and here at Precure as the Chief Science Officer, that's what I have on my to-do list, are those sorts of activities. So it's great having a to-do list and ticking things off, but the question is, what are you ticking off? What are you doing? And are you working towards your strengths every day? If you're not, then the good news is you can and change it. So go online, have a look, the link will be below, think about what your strengths are, discover something new about yourself. In breaking news, scientists have finally released a meta-analysis of the effects of exercise on depression, including major depressive disorder and mild and moderate depression. A meta-analysis is an accumulation of all of the randomized trials together showing the strength of the evidence. Now, the beautiful thing about this meta-analysis is it's adjusted for publication bias. So it's a very clear evidence of what the trials show. And what do the trials show? Well, you'll see in this forest plot here that they show that all the trials show some effect, some bigger than others, but taken together, the average effect is actually quite large. You can expect when you start exercise, if you're feeling down, especially with a more serious depression, to get around a 5 to 6 point increase in a depression scale. To put that in perspective, you can expect about just under a 2 point increase from taking an antidepressant. So it's 3 times more effective and maybe curative, which the SSRIs, the antidepressants, are not. So that's great news. And in breaking news on top of that, in a rare collaboration between the Australian and New Zealand governments, they've decided to actually face the facts and release a public health program around getting us more active. They call it the Go Your program. Not very politically correct in New Zealand, but it's going down great guns in Australia. Go Your, of course, stands for get off your ass. And we're really proud here on the Good News Show to be able to show you for the first time the 2 logos that the countries have come up with. The top there, you'll see the New Zealand logo. It's cost the New Zealand taxpayer $1.6 billion to produce this logo, but it's a pair of Kiwis being quite kind to each other and getting out and being active. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has apologised on behalf of all previous governments for the lack of focus on activity, and especially around how it affects mental health, and hopes that this is a move in the right direction to make New Zealand a better place. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, in the meantime, they paid nothing for the logo. They commissioned their boxing kangaroo logo from a 14-year-old schoolboy in Cabramatta, and they're excited with this Go Your Opportunity, but Morrison has deferred all further implementation of the program to all the states and territories, saying it's their responsibility, and not to implement this immediately would be un-Australian. So a couple of little differences between countries, but the upshot is we're now taking it seriously, that we can act with fitness and exercise as medicine against poor mental health. The evidence is there, the meta-analysis is there, and finally the will between Australia and New Zealand is there. Great news. There's new news out today about how nutrients might affect your brain and your mental health. And in particular, there's a couple of trials. The first from Australia, Felice Jacka's group in Melbourne, with their SMILES study, have been able to fundamentally affect depressive and anxiety symptoms by just improving the quality of people's food. They moved away from eating junk food to a focus on whole food in a Mediterranean diet style. Great outcomes there. There's another paper just out showing the benefits of a low carbohydrate diet with exercise around improving cognition and cognitive performance. That's great. And finally, in New Zealand, because we're leaders in this field, Professor Julia Ruckledge from the University of Canterbury has released a series of studies over the last couple of years showing how broad spectrum multivitamins, in other words, micronutrient addition, really helps both adults and children be more mentally healthy. And these effects are big effects, and they've been repeated by others overseas to mirror her work. So well done, Julia Ruckledge. You are a star, and hopefully the country will recognise that, and we can support what a great deal of difference you're making to the country and your potential to make a massive difference to mental health. In other news, the Scandinavians are showing some leadership, and it's really good news that getting hot now and then, they use saunas, but you could equally use a very hot bath if you don't have one of those rigged up at your house, has a profound effect on your health and longevity. So the strength of what we call the prospective studies, not trials, but prospective studies, actually show a pretty big effect. So dying of anything, if you're taking between 4 and 7 hot saunas a week, is a really big effect. This is a real medicine. And what is it about hot exposure that makes a difference? Well, it's stressful. And when you stress the body, especially the vascular system in the brain, it responds by building a better, stronger body. Its heart is better, blood pressure is lower, you're feeling better. And that process is called hormesis. That's the good news. Exercise does that as well. Cold immersion could do that as well, but we know this for certain now about heat and the development of heat shock proteins. We know about the improvements in blood volume and hematocrit, and there's even some evidence that doing these saunas or even a very hot bath has a very, very similar effect to exercise. And in fact, people who have exercised, they've finished their exercise with a sauna or a hot tub, have shown some added fitness benefits. So there's a great way to finish off your long run, isn't it? The weather forecast, well, frankly, outside at the moment here, it's raining, but the blue sky will come back. That's the good news. Remember, the weather is like your life. Clouds come and go, rain come and goes. There's good and bad weather, but behind the bad weather and clouds, there's always blue sky. It's always going to come back. That's the Good News Show. Good night.